They thought the silence of the mountains would swallow her name forever. When Elena's brothers closed the iron gates of the family mansion, leaving her with nothing but a rusted brass medallion and the cold of the night, they celebrated their victory. To them, Eleanor was just a burden to be discarded in the hills, but mountains aren't places for the weak, they're sanctuaries for the wronged. In just 3 days, what began as a desperate flight for survival transformed into the greatest reversal that town had ever seen. When Elena opened the door of a cabin that appeared on no map, she discovered that her grandmother had planned her rescue decades before she was born. Get ready to discover how 3 days of isolation transformed a homeless woman into the owner of an empire her brothers could never have imagined. If you believe that justice may delay but never fails those who keep faith, subscribe to this channel. Here we give voice to stories that prove the world goes round. Hit that like button so this story can reach someone who needs to remember that what goes around comes around. Because what Elena found hidden in those mountains wasn't just property, it was proof that the ones who truly love us plan for our protection even from beyond the grave. Eleanor Mitchell stood in the grand foyer of Ashwood Manor, the house where she'd been born 55 years ago, and listened to her brothers destroy her life with legal words. "The will is very clear," Marcus said, his expensive suit immaculate, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Father and mother left the estate to the children who contributed to the family legacy. That's Richard and myself. You were just a caretaker." Richard, standing beside Marcus near the mahogany table covered in legal documents, nodded. "We've consulted with attorneys. Your contribution was appreciated, Eleanor, but it doesn't constitute legal grounds for inheritance. You provided care, that's admirable. But Marcus and I built the family business, maintained the properties, created actual value." Eleanor's hands trembled. She'd spent the last 15 years caring for their parents, bathing them, feeding them, sitting through endless hospital visits, sacrificing her nursing career to be there every single day. And in 1 month since their deaths, her brothers had orchestrated this. "I lived here," Elena said quietly. "I took care of them when you two were too busy. I was here when Mom forgot our names. I was here when Dad couldn't walk anymore. Where were you? Building the portfolio that kept this house running." Marcus snapped, his sympathy evaporating. "Someone had to actually work while you played nurse." "I was a registered nurse," Elena said. "I quit my job to take care of them full-time because you refused to hire help. You said family should care for family. And we're grateful," Richard said smoothly. "Which is why we're giving you this." He slid an envelope across the table. $5,000. "Severance pay, essentially. More than fair for your services." Elena stared at the envelope. $5,000. For 15 years of her life, for watching her parents die by inches while her brothers visited once a month with expensive gifts and empty promises. "This house is my home," she said. "Was your home," Marcus corrected. "As of today, we're selling it. The new owners take possession in 30 days, but we need you out today. We have contractors coming tomorrow to start renovations." "Today?" Elena's voice cracked. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not really our problem," Richard said. "You're 55, Elena. You should have planned for your future instead of living off Mum and Dad." The cruelty was so casual it took her breath away. These were her brothers. They'd grown up in this house together, and now they were discarding her like garbage. "I want to take some things," Elena said. "My belongings, photos. Mom's—" "The contents of the house are included in the sale," Marcus interrupted. "You can take your personal clothing and items from your room. You have 2 hours. Charles will supervise to make sure nothing of value goes missing." Charles was their attorney, a thin man in his 40s who'd been standing silently in the corner. He nodded curtly at Elena. "You can't be serious," Elena whispered. 2 hours, Richard repeated. "After that, you're trespassing." Eleanor climbed the stairs to her small room on the 3rd floor, the room she'd occupied since childhood, while her brothers had claimed the larger 2nd-floor suites. Her hands shook as she pulled out an old backpack and began gathering her things. Clothes, a few books, her nursing credentials, though she hadn't used them in years, photos of her parents, but when she tried to take the family photo albums, Charles appeared in the doorway. "Those stay," he said. Mr. Marcus was clear. "Only your personal items. These are pictures of my parents," Elena said, "and of the property and family assets. They stay." Elena wanted to fight, but what was the point? She was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and too exhausted from grief to argue. Her parents had been dead only a month. She was still processing the loss, and now she was losing her home too. In the end, she left with a backpack containing clothes, her nursing license, and one thing her brothers hadn't thought to take, a tarnished brass medallion on a leather cord that had belonged to her grandmother. Isabella Mitchell had disappeared when Elena was 5 years old. One day she was there, a mysterious woman with silver hair who told Elena stories about the mountains. The next day she was gone. The family never spoke of her. But before she vanished, she'd given Elena this medallion, a circular brass piece engraved with an intricate pattern of leaves and a compass rose. "Keep this safe," Isabella had whispered. "Someday, when you need it most, you'll understand." Elena had worn it for 50 years, hidden under her clothes, a connection to the grandmother everyone else had forgotten. When she came downstairs with her backpack, Marcus and Richard were drinking scotch in their father's study, celebrating. "Where will you go?" Marcus asked, not really caring. "I don't know," Elena said honestly. "Well, figure it out quickly. Charles, escort her out." As Elena walked through the iron gates of Ashwood Manor for the last time, she heard Marcus call out behind her, "Go live with your memories in the hills since you love them so much." Both brothers laughed. Elena didn't turn around. She just kept walking, the evening sun setting behind the mountains in the distance, turning everything gold and orange. She had $5,000, a backpack, and absolutely nowhere to go. The town was small. Everyone knew the Mitchell family. Word would spread quickly that she'd been cast out. She couldn't face the stares, the whispers, the pity. So she did the only thing she could think of. She started walking toward the mountains, toward the highlands at the edge of the family property that no one had visited in decades, toward the wilderness where her grandmother had told her stories about hidden places and secret strength. She didn't have a plan. She just knew she couldn't stay in town. Couldn't be poor Elena who'd wasted her life and ended up with nothing. As she walked, the sky began to darken, not just from sunset, but from clouds rolling in fast from the west. A storm was coming. Elena kept walking anyway. At least in the mountains, no one would see her cry. The path up the mountain started as an old service road, cracked and overgrown, barely visible through the weeds. Elena had seen it 1,000 times from the manor's windows, but had never walked it. No one in the family had gone up to the highlands in her lifetime. "Nothing up there but rocks and trees," her father used to say. "Worthless land. Can't build on it, can't farm it. But it's ours, so we keep it." Now Elena understood. The highlands were part of the estate her brothers had just stolen. 500 acres of mountain wilderness that they'd probably sell to developers who'd clear-cut it for vacation homes. The thought made her walk faster, anger fueling her tired legs. She'd lost everything, her home, her family, her parents, and her brothers had celebrated like they'd won something valuable, like she was the problem. The service road ended after a mile, turning into a hiking trail that was more suggestion than actual path. Eleanor pushed through underbrush, her backpack catching on branches, her nursing shoes, practical but not meant for hiking, slipping on loose rocks. The temperature was dropping fast. It was late September in the North Carolina mountains, and evenings could get cold. Eleanor had grabbed a jacket, but it was thin, not nearly warm enough if she had to spend the night outside. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was getting closer. Elena kept climbing, her legs burned, her lungs ached. At 55, she wasn't in bad shape. Caregiving was physical work, but she wasn't prepared for mountain hiking either. As the trail grew steeper, Elena's anger gave way to something colder, despair. What was she doing? Running away to the mountains like a child. She should go back to town, find a motel, use that $5,000 to figure out her next move. Maybe she could sue her brothers. Maybe she could, but even as she thought it, she knew it was hopeless. Marcus and Richard had money, lawyers, and a will that was apparently ironclad. She had nothing but grief and exhaustion. The first drops of rain hit her face. cold and hard like little slaps. Elena looked around desperately. She needed shelter, but there was nothing. Just trees and rocks, and the mountain rising endlessly above her. She kept climbing, the rain getting heavier, soaking through her jacket and backpack, her hair plastered to her head, her shoes sliding in mud. Lightning flashed, illuminating the forest in stark white and shadow. Thunder followed immediately, close, threatening. Elena was crying now, tears mixing with rain. This was it. This was how she'd die. 55 years old, unmarried, childless, homeless, dying of hypothermia on a mountain because she'd been too proud to beg for help in town. "I'm sorry, Mom," she sobbed. "I'm sorry I couldn't save the house. I'm sorry I wasn't enough." Another lightning flash, and in that brief moment of illumination, Elena saw something that didn't belong in the wilderness. A straight line, a corner, the edge of a structure. She blinked rain out of her eyes and stared. There, maybe 50 yards off the trail, partially hidden by trees and overgrown with vines, was a building, a cabin. Elena stumbled toward it, her exhaustion forgotten. The structure was small, made of dark wood that blended almost perfectly with the forest. If not for that lightning flash catching its corner, she never would have seen it. As she got closer, Elena realized the cabin wasn't falling apart like she'd expected. The wood was weathered but solid. The roof was intact. Vines covered much of it, but they seemed to be growing around the structure, not destroying it. The door was wooden, simple, with an iron handle. Elena tried it, expecting it to be locked or rusted shut. It opened smoothly as if someone had oiled the hinges yesterday. Elena practically fell inside, slamming the door behind her against the wind and rain. She stood in the darkness, dripping and shaking, listening to the storm rage outside. She fumbled in her backpack for her phone. She'd grabbed it but hadn't thought to check the battery. The screen lit up, 15% charge, no signal, but it gave her enough light to see. The cabin was one large room, maybe 20 feet by 20 feet. There was a stone fireplace against the far wall, a simple wooden table and 2 chairs, a cot in the corner with what looked like a wool blanket folded neatly on it, shelves along one wall holding jars and cans, food, supplies. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, but nothing was rotting or ruined. It was as if someone had left this place yesterday, intending to return tomorrow, and then simply didn't. Elena used her phone light to explore. The jars on the shelves contained preserved food, beans, vegetables, even jam. The labels were handwritten but faded, dates barely visible. 1975, 1974, some without dates at all. Nearly 50 years old, but the seals looked intact. On the table was a lantern, old-fashioned kerosene. Elena found matches in a tin on the shelf, surprisingly dry. She lit the lantern, and warm light filled the cabin. The space was simple but carefully arranged. Nothing was random. Everything had a purpose and a place. On the wall above the fireplace was a name carved into a wooden plaque. Isabella's Refuge, 1974. Elena's breath caught. Isabella, her grandmother. This was her grandmother's cabin. The grandmother who disappeared when Elena was 5. The one the family never talked about. She'd been here. She'd built this place. And somehow, impossibly, it had been waiting for 50 years. Helena sank onto the wooden chair, water dripping from her clothes onto the floor, and stared at her grandmother's name. She wasn't alone in the wilderness. She was in her grandmother's sanctuary, and for the first time since her parents died, Elena felt something other than grief. She felt curiosity. Why had Isabella built this cabin? Why had it been kept secret? And why did it feel less like she'd stumbled onto it by accident and more like she'd been guided here? Elena reached under her wet jacket and pulled out the brass medallion. In the lantern light, its engraved pattern seemed to shimmer. Leaves and a compass rose, intricate and beautiful. Someday, when you need it most, you'll understand. She needed it now. She needed understanding, purpose, something to hold on to. Elena stood and walked to the fireplace. The stone was beautiful, river rock, carefully fitted. And there, in the center of the mantel, was something she hadn't noticed before. a circular indentation in the stone, about the size of her medallion, with a pattern carved into it. Leaves and a compass rose. Eleanor's hand trembled as she lifted the medallion and held it up to the indentation. They matched perfectly. Her heart pounding, Eleanor pressed the medallion into the stone. Click. The sound was small but definite, mechanical, something old waking up. And then, with a grinding of stone on stone, a section of the fireplace wall swung inward, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Elena stared, her exhaustion forgotten, as her grandmother's secret revealed itself at last. Eleanor stood frozen, the lantern in her shaking hand casting dancing shadows across the hidden compartment. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin there was only the sound of her own breathing and the quiet grinding of the stone mechanism settling into place. The compartment was about 2 feet wide and 3 feet tall, carved directly into the stone behind the fireplace. Inside, protected from 50 years of weather and time, were several items carefully wrapped in oilcloth. Eleanor set the lantern on the mantel and reached in with trembling fingers. The first package was heavy. A book, she realized as she unwrapped it. A leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with the same leaf and compass rose pattern as her medallion. She opened it carefully. The first page, in elegant handwriting, read, "For my granddaughter Elena. If you're reading this, then everything I feared has come to pass. My sons have become the men I raised them not to be, and you, my darling girl, have paid the price for their greed. I am so sorry, but I am also prepared. What you'll find in this cabin is your birthright. Not the house, not the furniture, but something far more valuable, the truth and the power to reclaim what is rightfully yours. Read carefully, act wisely, and remember, the mountain protects those who respect it. Your loving grandmother, Isabella Mitchell, June 1974. Elena's vision blurred with tears. Her grandmother had written this 50 years ago, when Elena was only 5 years old. But somehow, Isabella had known, had seen the future and prepared for it. Eleanor carefully set the journal aside and reached for the next item. It was a metal box, surprisingly heavy. She pried open the lid. Inside were documents, legal papers, property deeds, survey maps. Eleanor spread them on the table, her hands still shaking, and began to read by the lantern light. The first document made her stop breathing. Property deed recorded 1952 owner, Isabella Grace Mitchell. Property, 500 acres, Ashwood Mountain Range. Section, High Lands. The paper was official, stamped, notarized, and stapled to it was a second document, newer, dated 1973. Geological Survey Report Property, Ashwood Highlands. Finding, significant deposits of rose quartz, rare formation. Estimated value, $8 to $12 million, $1973. Elena read it 3 times before the words made sense. 8 to 12 million in 1973. Adjusted for inflation, she couldn't even calculate it. 20 million more? But that wasn't all. Underneath was another document. Private survey. Ashwood Manor, 1971. This one was different. It was a land survey of the manor itself, the house where Elena had just been thrown out, and stamped across it in red ink was a single word, illegal. Elena read the attached report, her shock deepening with every line. Ashwood Manor had been built in 1890 by her great-grandfather, but according to this survey, the original property line had been incorrectly recorded. The manor house itself sat on land that was actually part of the High Lands Tract, land that belonged to Isabella, not to the main estate, which meant Ashwood Manor legally belonged to whoever owned the Highlands, and according to the deed in Eleanor's hands, the Highlands belonged to Isabella Mitchell, who, according to the final document in the box, had left everything to my granddaughter Elena Mitchell to be claimed when she discovers this refuge. Elena sank into the chair, the documents spread before her like pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. Her grandmother had owned the mountain, had discovered it contained millions in rare quartz, had realized that the family manor was built on her land, not theirs, and had hidden all of it away. knowing that her greedy sons would destroy Elena to get it. "You protected me," Elena whispered to the empty cabin. 50 years ago, you protected me. But there was more in the box. At the bottom, wrapped in silk, was a letter. More recent than the others, the paper crisper. Elena unfolded it carefully. "My dearest Elena, if you found this, I am long gone, but my love for you is not. I have watched from afar as you grew into a woman of such kindness and strength. I have grieved that I could not be there to guide you, but I had to disappear to protect what I'd built for you. Your father and uncle, my sons, they showed their true nature early. I watched them lie, cheat, manipulate to get what they wanted. I could not let them destroy you as they would have destroyed me. So I left. I took the most valuable thing I owned, this land, and I hid it where they would never think to look. In plain sight but invisible to those whose eyes see only money and power. The cabin will provide shelter, the land will provide wealth, but more importantly, the knowledge that someone loved you enough to plan for your protection, that will provide strength. Do not let them make you small. Do not let them convince you that you are worthless. You are the only one in the family who inherited what truly matters: compassion, loyalty, love. Use what I've given you wisely, but more importantly, use it to build a life of meaning, not just wealth. I love you, my darling girl. I always have. I always will." Your grandmother, Isabella Elena, pressed the letter to her chest and wept, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude and love for a woman who'd disappeared when she was a child, but who'd never stopped protecting her. The storm outside was reaching its peak, rain hammering on the roof, wind howling through the trees. But inside the cabin, Elena was warm, dry, and suddenly, impossibly, no longer helpless. She spent the next hour reading through every document in the box. The geological surveys were detailed. The rose quartz deposit was significant, unique, and highly valuable. Several mining companies had expressed interest in the 1970s, but Isabella had turned them all down. There were also letters from someone named Thomas Whitmore, an attorney in Asheville, who'd helped Isabella arrange everything. His most recent letter, from 1995, confirmed that all documents remained valid and that he or his successors would honor the trust Isabella had established. At the bottom of the box was one final item: a small, old-fashioned ham radio carefully wrapped in plastic, and a note: emergency frequency, 14 250 MHz. Call sign, W4TW. Thomas Whitmore. He is waiting. Elena looked at the radio. It was old but appeared functional. Could it really still work after 50 years? Only one way to find out. But not tonight. Tonight, she needed rest. She needed to process what she'd discovered. She needed to transform from Elena the victim into Elena the owner of everything her brothers tried to steal. She spread the wool blanket on the cot. It smelled faintly of cedar and lavender, preserved like everything else in the cabin by her grandmother's careful planning. As Elena lay down, exhausted beyond measure, she held her grandmother's letter close to her heart. For 50 years, she'd been alone. Now she realized she never had been. Isabella had been with her all along, protecting her across the decades, planning for this exact moment. Tomorrow, Elena would fight back. Tomorrow, she would reclaim what was hers. But tonight, she would rest in her grandmother's sanctuary, surrounded by love that transcended death itself. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin's small window. For a moment, she was disoriented. This wasn't her room at the manor. Then memory flooded back. The expulsion, the climb, the storm, the secret compartment. She sat up quickly. Had it been real? Or had exhaustion and grief created a desperate hallucination? But no, there on the table were the documents, the journal, the legal papers, proving that everything she'd discovered last night was real. Elena stood and stretched, her body aching from yesterday's climb and the unfamiliar cot. She was hungry, thirsty, and desperately needed to use a bathroom. The bathroom situation was quickly resolved. There was an outhouse behind the cabin, simple but functional and surprisingly well maintained. When Elena opened the door, she found it clean, with a supply of biodegradable tissue and even a small bottle of hand sanitizer. that impossibly hadn't expired. How? How was everything in this cabin so perfectly preserved after 50 years? Back inside, Eleanor examined the shelves more carefully. The preserved foods dated from the 1970s, but there were also newer items. Bottled water with dates from the 1990s, emergency ration bars from 2005, batteries from 2010. Someone had been maintaining this cabin, not living in it, but checking on it, replacing supplies, keeping it ready. Thomas Whitmore, maybe. The attorney Isabella had trusted. Elena picked up the ham radio and examined it. The plastic wrapping had kept it pristine. She found batteries in one of the supply boxes, new ones dated 2023. Someone had definitely been keeping this place ready. She installed the batteries and turned the radio on. Static crackled, then cleared. The display lit up, functional. Eleanor sat at the table with the radio, Isabella's letter, and the document spread before her. She needed a plan. She needed to think clearly, not react emotionally. First, what did she actually own? According to the documents, she owned 500 acres of mountain land, including the highlands where this cabin sat, a significant deposit of rare rose quartz, and most importantly, the land underneath Ashwood Manor itself. Second, what could she do with this? The geological surveys from the 1970s estimated the quartz at $12 million. Adjusted for inflation over 50 years, that was easily $50 million worth of raw minerals. And that was before considering development potential. The mountain views alone would make this property worth millions to resort developers. But Elena didn't want to sell to developers. Her grandmother's letter had been clear. Use what I've given you wisely. Build a life of meaning, not just wealth. Third, how did she reclaim the manor? This was trickier. The legal documents showed the manor was built on Isabella's land illegally, but Marcus and Richard had possession now. They had momentum, lawyers, and the presumption of ownership. Elena would need help. She would need Thomas Whitmore or his successor. She would need to move quickly before her brothers sold the property. She picked up the radio and set it to the frequency Isabella had written down, 14-tune, 250 megahertz. She pressed the transmit button, her heart pounding. This is Elena Mitchell, calling for W4TW Thomas Whitmore. Is anyone listening? Static. She tried again. This is Elena Mitchell at Isabella's refuge calling Thomas Whitmore. Call sign W4TW. Please respond. More static. Then suddenly a voice, elderly but strong. Elena Mitchell. I've been waiting for this call for 30 years. Elena's breath caught. Mr. Whitmore? Thomas Whitmore Jr., actually. My father passed in 1995, but he made me promise to monitor this frequency every day. He said Isabella's granddaughter would call when she was ready. I thought he was crazy, but I kept the promise, and here you are. I need help, Elena said. My brothers... I know, Thomas Jr. interrupted. I know everything. My father briefed me completely. Isabella's trust is still active. All documents are valid, and I've been following your family from a distance. I know about your parents passing, I know about the estate settlement, and I know about your expulsion yesterday. How do you know all that? Because Isabella paid my father and my father paid me to watch over you from afar, to make sure that when the day came, and we all knew it would, you'd have the legal support you needed. Elena, I have a team of attorneys ready to move. We've been ready for decades. We just needed you to make the call. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. She really did plan everything. She loved you more than you can imagine. Now listen carefully. I need you to stay exactly where you are for the next 3 days. Don't go back to town. Don't contact your brothers. Let them think you've disappeared into the mountains. Meanwhile, I'll file the necessary paperwork. By the end of the 3rd day, I'll come to you personally with documents that will change everything. What documents? Eviction notices for your brothers, ownership transfer for the manor, injunctions preventing any sale of the property, and a full accounting of what you actually own. Elena, you're not just getting your home back. You're inheriting an empire your grandmother built and hid. But you need to trust me and stay hidden for 3 days. Can you do that? Elena looked around the cabin, her grandmother's refuge prepared 50 years ago for exactly this moment. "Yes," she said, "I can do that." "Good. There's food, water, and shelter. Use this time to read your grandmother's journal. She left instructions for you, not just legal ones but personal ones. Learn from her, become strong, because in 3 days you're going to walk back into your family's world as someone very different from the woman they threw out." After the call ended, Eleanor sat in silence for a long moment. Then she picked up Isabella's journal and opened it to the first page of actual entries, past the letter. March 1968. "I've discovered something my husband's family doesn't know. The mineral rights to this mountain were never properly transferred. According to the original deed from 1850, they belong to my great-grandmother's line, not my husband's. The manor house was built assuming ownership, but legally it sits on my land. I haven't told anyone. My sons are already showing signs of their father's greed. If they knew about this, they would destroy each other, and me, to control it." Eleanor kept reading, fascinated. Isabella's journal covered years of secret planning, legal maneuvering, and heartbreak as she watched her sons become men she couldn't respect. December 1973. "The geological survey is complete. The quartz deposit is beyond my wildest dreams. But I'm not celebrating. I'm terrified. If my sons discover this, they'll try to take it from me. They've already been pressuring me to sign over my worthless mountain land to them. They think I'm a foolish old woman who doesn't understand property value, but I understand perfectly. I understand that they value money over family, and I understand that my granddaughter Eleanor, only 4 years old, is the only one in this family with a pure heart. She is the only one who deserves this legacy. I'm making my plan. I will disappear. I will let them think I'm dead or gone mad and wandered into the wilderness. And I will hide everything where only someone wearing my medallion, the medallion I gave to Eleanor, could ever find it. When the time comes, when they try to destroy her as they've tried to destroy me, she'll find this place. And she'll be ready." Eleanor closed the journal, overwhelmed. Her grandmother hadn't disappeared because she was senile or lost. She disappeared intentionally, staging her own vanishing to protect Eleanor's inheritance. And for 50 years, she'd been right. Marcus and Richard had indeed tried to destroy Elena, and Elena had indeed found the cabin. Everything was unfolding exactly as Isabella had planned. Elena spent the rest of the day cleaning the cabin, reading more of the journal, and organizing the documents. Tomorrow she would continue preparing, and on the third day she would be ready to face her brothers, not as the woman they'd thrown out, but as the woman her grandmother had raised her to be, strong, prepared, and absolutely done being dismissed. On the second day, Elena woke early and devoted herself to understanding every detail of her inheritance. She spread the documents across the table and made careful notes. The property deed was unassailable, recorded in 1952, when land records were transitioning to a new system and filed correctly in both the old and new registries. Isabella had been meticulous. The geological surveys were even more fascinating. Eleanor had basic scientific knowledge from nursing school, but geology wasn't her field. Still, she could understand enough to see that what her grandmother had discovered was extraordinary. Rose quartz typically formed in small deposits, valued for jewelry and decoration. But the Ashwood Mountain deposit was different, a massive crystalline formation running deep underground with unusual clarity and color that made it exponentially more valuable. The 1973 survey estimated 200 tons of extractable high-grade rose quartz. At 1973 prices, that was $12 million. Current market prices for rare quartz were, Elena did the math with the calculator on her phone, roughly 10 times higher. She was sitting on $80 to $120 million in mineral wealth alone. Then there was the land itself, 500 acres with mountain views, pristine forest, and the potential for exclusive development. Real estate values in the North Carolina mountains had skyrocketed over the past 50 years. Similar properties were selling for $20,000 plus per acre. That was another $10 million minimum. And finally, there was Ashwood Manor, the house her brothers thought they'd stolen. According to Isabella's survey, the manor sat entirely on land that legally belonged to the Highlands Tract. which meant it belonged to whoever owned this mountain, which meant it belonged to Eleanor. The manor itself was worth at least $3 million, a historic property on significant acreage, but more important than the monetary value was the symbolic victory, taking back the home her brothers had stolen. Elena sat back, overwhelmed. In total, she was looking at somewhere between $90 and $135 million in assets. Not cash. Most of it was unrealized value in land and minerals. But still, an empire. Her grandmother had been a millionaire and had told no one, had lived modestly, died mysteriously, and left everything to the granddaughter she knew would be betrayed. Eleanor picked up the journal and continued reading. The later entries were philosophical, reflective. June 1974. I finished preparing the cabin. Everything is in place. Tomorrow I'll stage my disappearance. They'll find my car by the river. They'll search for a week, and then they'll declare me dead or missing and move on with their greedy lives. I feel no guilt about this deception. I've tried to teach my sons better. I've tried to show them that family matters more than money. They've refused to learn. Now I'm protecting the one person in this family who understands what really matters. Eleanor is 5 years old. She brings me dandelions and calls them gold. She shares her cookies with birds. She cries when she sees someone hurt. That child, that beautiful, empathetic child, is who this is all for. I won't live to see her inherit this. I'm 72 years old and my heart is weak. The doctor says I have maybe a year, maybe less, but that's enough time to disappear, to let the family think I'm gone, and to ensure that my legal arrangements are unbreakable. By the time Elena inherits, I'll be truly dead, but my love will remain, my protection will remain, and she will know, finally, that she was always the one who mattered most. Elena wiped tears from her eyes. Isabella had died knowing Elena would face betrayal, but also knowing she'd equipped her to survive it. That was a kind of love so deep it defied time itself. The entry dated July 1974 was the last one. They found my car today. I watched from the high lands as they searched. Marcus looked annoyed. Richard looked calculating, probably already thinking about the will. Neither looked heartbroken. I was right to do this. They don't deserve to inherit my love or my labor. Only Elena does. If you're reading this, my darling girl, know that every day of my life after you were born was spent loving you and planning for your future. You were my redemption. You were proof that our family line hadn't been entirely corrupted by greed. Use what I've given you not just to survive, but to thrive. Build something meaningful. Help others. Show them what strength looks like. And never ever let anyone make you feel less than you are. I love you forever. Grandma Isabella. Elena closed the journal and held it to her chest. Tomorrow would be day 3. Thomas Whitmore Jr. would arrive with legal documents, and her brothers would discover that the woman they'd discarded owned everything they thought was theirs. But tonight Eleanor had one more task. She needed to clean this cabin, not just physically, but spiritually. She needed to make it a place of strength, not just shelter. She spent the evening organizing. She took inventory of supplies, more than enough to last weeks if needed. She found cleaning supplies and scrubbed every surface until the cabin gleamed. She opened the windows to air out 50 years of stillness and let in the mountain breeze. And she prepared herself mentally for what came next. Not revenge. Isabella's journal had been clear about that. Revenge makes us small, she'd written. Justice makes us strong. Eleanor didn't want to hurt her brothers. She wanted to reclaim her dignity, her inheritance and her future. She wanted them to understand that their cruelty had failed, that she'd survived and thrived despite them. As the sun set on the second day, Eleanor stood on the small porch of the cabin and looked down the mountain toward where Ashwood Manor sat in the valley below. From here she couldn't see it, but she knew it was there. Tomorrow she'd take it back, not with anger, but with the quiet strength of a woman who discovered she'd never been powerless after all. She'd just been waiting for her inheritance to reveal itself. The third day dawned clear and bright, the storm 2 nights ago now a memory. Elena woke feeling different, not just rested but transformed. She'd spent 2 days reading her grandmother's wisdom, understanding her inheritance, and coming to terms with what had happened. She wasn't the same woman her brothers had thrown out. That woman had been grieving, exhausted, and convinced of her own powerlessness. This woman knew better. Eleanor prepared herself carefully. She'd brought only basic clothes in her backpack, but she washed and pressed them as best she could. She braided her grey hair neatly. She stood tall. In nursing school they'd taught her that healing had stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Elena realized she'd been stuck in depression for 15 years, convinced that her sacrifice was noble, even as it drained her life away. Now she was somewhere beyond acceptance. She was in reclamation. Thomas Whitmore Jr. had said he'd arrive by midday. Elena spent the morning preparing the cabin for visitors. She set out the documents neatly on the table: property deeds, surveys, legal papers, all organized and ready to be reviewed. She also read the final sections of Isabella's journal, the parts that weren't about legal planning, but about life philosophy. March 1973. I've been thinking about what I want to tell Eleanor when she finally reads this. Not just the legal facts, but the deeper truths. Here's what I've learned in 71 years. The people who try to make you small are the ones most afraid of your potential. They see your strength and recognize it as a threat to their mediocrity. So they belittle you, dismiss you, convince you that you're the problem. But you're not the problem, Elena. You never were. Your kindness isn't weakness. Your compassion isn't stupidity. Your willingness to sacrifice for others isn't a character flaw. Those are your superpowers. The weak can't recognize them as such. When you claim this inheritance, don't become like them. Don't let their greed infect you. Use your wealth the way I wish I'd been brave enough to use mine, to lift others up, to create meaning, to prove that power and kindness can coexist. That's the real legacy I'm leaving you. Not the money or the land, but the example of what to do with it. Elena felt those words settle into her bones. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want to crush her brothers the way they'd tried to crush her. She wanted something bigger. She wanted to prove that their way of living, the grasping, the cruelty, the value of money over people, wasn't the only way. At noon exactly, Eleanor heard an engine. She stepped onto the cabin's small porch and watched as a jeep navigated the rough trail up the mountain. It parked near the cabin, and a man in his 60s got out. Tall, thin, with silver hair and kind eyes. "Elena Mitchell," he called. "Thomas Whitmore?" she replied. He smiled. "Junior. But please call me Tom. My father spent 30 years talking about you. Feels like I already know you." Tom climbed the porch steps and extended his hand. His grip was firm, his expression warm. "My father said you were special." He was right. "He never even met me," Eleanor said. "Didn't need to. Your grandmother talked about you constantly, and she was an excellent judge of character." Tom gestured to the cabin. "May we talk inside? I have documents that will require your signature." They sat at the small table, and Tom spread out a series of legal papers, more official, more recent than Isabella's original documents. "First, the good news," Tom said. "Everything your grandmother set up is ironclad. My firm has been managing the trust for 50 years. We've paid property taxes on the highlands in your name, well, in the trust's name, since 1974. We've maintained the cabin. We've protected the mineral rights. We've monitored your brother's activities. And now that you've claimed the inheritance by finding this place and calling us, everything transfers to you officially." He pulled out a document. "This is the deed transfer. Sign here, and you become the legal owner of 500 acres, including mineral rights and everything on this land." Elena signed, her hand steady. "Second," Tom continued, "I filed emergency injunctions this morning to prevent your brothers from selling Ashwood Manor. They can't move forward with any sale until the property dispute is resolved." "What dispute?" Elena asked. Tom smiled. "The dispute over whether they have any legal right to the manor at all. According to the survey your grandmother commissioned, the manor sits on land that's part of the Highlands Tract, which means it belongs to you. Can they fight that? They can try. But the survey was conducted by the state's chief surveyor in 1971. It's been on file for over 50 years. They just never knew to look for it. My father made sure it stayed quietly on record, waiting for the day we'd need it." Elena shook her head in amazement. How did Isabella think of everything? She was brilliant. Quiet, underestimated, and absolutely brilliant. She knew exactly what your brothers would do because she'd watched them their entire lives. She planned for every contingency. Tom pulled out another document. Which brings us to the final piece. This is a formal notice of ownership and intent to reclaim. I'll be serving it to your brothers this afternoon. Serving it how? Tom's smile widened. In person. They called my office this morning asking about bringing equipment up to the highlands. They said they wanted to clear squatters from the mountain. Apparently they heard you'd been seen heading this direction and assumed you were trespassing on their land. It's my land, Elena said quietly. Exactly. So I told them I'd meet them here this afternoon to discuss property rights. They think they're coming to intimidate you. Instead, they're going to discover they've lost everything. Tom paused. How do you feel about that? Elena considered the question honestly. Not triumphant, not vengeful. Just ready. Ready for it to be over. Ready to move forward. That's exactly the right attitude, Tom said. Your grandmother would be proud. They spent the next hour going over every detail. The mineral rights alone were worth a staggering amount. Tom's firm had been contacted multiple times over the years by mining companies interested in the property. The offers had climbed as high as $95 million for extraction rights. We never responded, Tom said. We were waiting for you. The decision is yours. Sell the rights, lease them, or keep the minerals undisturbed. What would Isabella want? Eleanor asked. She wanted you to choose. But she did write in a letter to my father that she hoped you'd find a way to use the land that honored it rather than destroyed it. Development that respected the mountain, not stripped it bare. At 2 o'clock, they heard engines again. Multiple vehicles this time. Tom looked at Elena. Ready? Elena stood, smoothed her simple clothes, and lifted her chin. Ready. They stepped out onto the porch together. Coming up the trail were 3 vehicles. Marcus's luxury SUV, Richard's sedan, and a large pickup truck with several men in it, probably the clearing crew her brothers had hired. The vehicles parked and her brothers got out. Marcus wore an expensive suit despite the mountain setting. Richard was in business casual, his lawyer's briefcase in hand. Both looked irritated by the rough drive. Then they saw Elena standing on the cabin porch with Tom beside her, and their expressions shifted to shock. What are you doing here? Marcus demanded. This is private property. Yes, Elena said calmly. It is. My property. Don't be ridiculous, Richard snapped. This land belongs to the estate. You're trespassing. Tom stepped forward. Gentlemen, I'm Thomas Whitmore, Jr., attorney at law. I represent Miss Eleanor Mitchell, and I'm here to inform you that you're the ones trespassing on her land. That's absurd, Marcus said. This Highlands tract is part of the family estate. It's been in the family for 102 years, Tom interrupted. But it was never legally transferred to your father's line. It remained the property of your grandmother, Isabella Mitchell, who maintained sole ownership until her death. She left it, via a valid and recorded trust, to Miss Eleanor Mitchell, who as of this morning is the legal owner of these 500 acres. He handed Richard a folder. That's the deed, the trust documents, and the property tax records going back 50 years. All in order, all legal, all unbreakable. Richard opened the folder, his face going pale as he read. Marcus looked over his shoulder. This can't be right, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its confidence. It is, Tom said, and there's more. You may want to sit down for this next part. We're not sitting anywhere, Richard snapped. We own the family estate. You inherited a house built on stolen land, Tom said, his voice hard now. In 1971, your grandmother commissioned a boundary survey. She discovered that Ashwood Manor was built on a portion of the Highlands tract, not on the separate estate parcel, which means the manor itself sits on Miss Mitchell's land, which means you've been living in her house. The silence was absolute. Elena watched her brothers' faces cycle through emotions. Disbelief, confusion, dawning horror, desperate denial. That's impossible, Marcus finally whispered. It's documented fact, Tom said. He handed Marcus a second folder. That's the survey, the legal analysis. And as of this morning, an injunction preventing you from selling, mortgaging, or otherwise disposing of the Ashwood Manor property pending resolution of the ownership dispute. A dispute which, I assure you, you will lose." Marcus sank against his SUV, the folder falling from his hands. Richard, however, rallied. "This is a setup, some kind of fraud. We'll fight this in court. You'll lose," Tom said calmly. "Every document is authentic, recorded, and publicly available. You just never knew to look for them. Your grandmother made sure of that." Eleanor finally spoke. "She knew. 50 years ago, she knew exactly what you'd do. She knew you'd betray me. She knew you'd take everything and leave me with nothing. So she protected me in the one way you'd never see coming. This is because of her?" Marcus said, gesturing wildly at the cabin. "The crazy old woman who disappeared into the mountains?" "The brilliant old woman who outsmarted you from beyond the grave," Eleanor corrected. "She wasn't crazy. She was careful. She saw who you really were, and she made sure you couldn't destroy me the way you destroyed everything else you touched." Richard's face was red with fury. "You can't do this. We'll fight. We'll prove the documents are forged. You'll do nothing," Tom said, "because if you try to fight this, I'll file criminal charges for fraud related to the estate settlement. You misrepresented the property inventory. You knowingly excluded assets you should have disclosed. You defrauded your sister of her rightful inheritance. I've documented everything. So here's what's going to happen instead." He pulled out a final document. "This is a settlement offer. You acknowledge Elena's ownership of the Highlands and the manor. You vacate Ashwood Manor within 30 days, and in exchange, Elena agrees not to press criminal charges or sue for the value of the time you've spent living on her property." "That's insane," Marcus said. "We'll be homeless. We'll have nothing. You'll have the 500 acres father actually left you," Eleanor said. "The lowlands tract. The land that was legitimately his to give. That's worth more than most people have. It's just not worth what you thought you had when you were living in my house." "And," Tom added, "Miss Mitchell is also prepared to offer you employment." Both brothers stared. Elena explained, her voice steady and calm despite her pounding heart. "I'm establishing a foundation, the Isabella Mitchell Foundation. It will focus on supporting elderly caregivers, people like me who sacrifice years of their lives to care for aging parents, people who end up with nothing because they chose love over career. The foundation will provide financial support, respite care, and eventually housing." She looked at her brothers. "You're going to work for that foundation. You're going to use your business skills to make it successful. You are going to spend the rest of your lives helping the kind of people you used to despise. And maybe, just maybe, you'll learn what actually matters in life." "And if we refuse?" Richard asked. "Then I file charges, sue you for every penny you have left, and let the world know exactly what you did to your sister," Tom said. "Your choice, redemption or ruin." The brothers looked at each other. The fight had gone out of them. They'd lost, and they knew it. "We need time to think," Marcus finally said. "You have until sunset," Tom replied. "Then I file the paperwork with or without your cooperation." The brothers got back in their vehicles without another word and drove away, the pickup truck with the clearing crew following in confusion. When they were gone, Elena sat down heavily on the porch steps. "Did that really just happen?" Tom sat beside her. "Your grandmother spent 50 years planning it. Yes, it really just happened. How do you feel?" Elena thought about it, tired, relieved, and ready to start something new, something that matters. "That," Tom said with a smile, "is exactly what Isabella hoped you'd say." 3 hours later, just as the sun was beginning to set, Marcus and Richard returned. This time they came alone, no crew, no equipment, just two men who'd aged a decade in a single afternoon. Eleanor and Tom were still on the cabin porch, going over foundation plans, when the vehicles pulled up. Marcus got out slowly. He looked broken, wasn't quite the right word. Humbled, maybe, forced to face reality. "We'll sign," he said without preamble. "We'll agree to everything. But I want to understand. Why the foundation? Why offer us anything at all? We threw you out. We treated you like garbage. You could destroy us completely. Why don't you?" Eleanor stood and walked down the porch steps until she was standing a few feet from her brothers, close enough to see the lines of stress on their faces, the grey in their hair, the way their expensive clothes suddenly looked like costumes. "Because Grandmother Isabella taught me something you never learned," Eleanor said. "Revenge makes us small, justice makes us strong, and mercy makes us human." "We don't deserve mercy," Richard said quietly. "No," Elena agreed. "You don't. But I'm not offering mercy for your sake. I'm offering it for mine, because I don't want to spend the rest of my life consumed by anger at what you did to me. I want to spend it building something meaningful." She pulled out her phone and showed them photos she'd taken from Isabella's journal. "Grandmother saw this coming 50 years ago. She saw what you'd become, she saw how you'd treat me, and she could have set things up to destroy you completely. But she didn't. She set things up to protect me and give you one final chance to become better people. By making us work for the Foundation," Marcus said. "By giving you the opportunity to do something worthwhile with your lives," Elena corrected. "You've spent decades chasing money. How happy has that made you? How fulfilled? How many real friends do you have? How many people actually love you, not your bank accounts?" Richard flinched. Marcus looked away. "I spent 15 years caring for Mom and Dad," Elena continued. "I gave up my career, my independence, my chance at my own family. And you know what? I don't regret it, because those 15 years meant something. They mattered. I was there when Mom forgot everyone else but still remembered my name. I was there when Dad said his final words. I was there for things that actually matter." "While we were at board meetings," Marcus said bitterly. "While you were chasing more," Eleanor said. "More money, more property, more status. And now you've learned that more is never enough. You can't keep it. You can't control it. And it doesn't love you back." She pulled the settlement papers from Tom's briefcase and set them on the hood of Marcus's SUV. "This is your chance to do something that matters, to take your business skills, which are real, I'm not denying that, and use them for something other than accumulation. The Foundation will need infrastructure, fundraising, management. You'll be perfect for that. And maybe over time you'll discover that helping people feels better than using them." "And if we refuse?" Richard asked. "Then you refuse," Elena said simply. "I'll still start the Foundation. I'll still build something meaningful. But you'll face criminal fraud charges, civil suits, and the knowledge that you had one final chance to redeem yourselves, and you chose pride over purpose." Marcus picked up the papers and read through them slowly. Tom had been thorough. The settlement protected Elena's interests while giving her brothers a clear path forward. "The Foundation will pay us?" Marcus asked. "Standard salary for executive directors of non-profits this size," Tom confirmed. "Not what you're used to, but comfortable. And contingent on performance and ethical behavior. Miss Mitchell will have oversight." "So she'll be our boss," Richard said. "Yes," Eleanor said, "I will, and if you abuse the position, if you try to embezzle or manipulate or hurt people the way you hurt me, you're gone. No second chances. But if you genuinely try to help, if you use your skills to make the Foundation successful, then you'll have meaningful work and the chance to rebuild your relationship with your sister. Maybe not to what it should have been, but to something better than what it is now." Marcus looked at Richard. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then Marcus pulled out a pen. "Where do we sign?" "Here," Tom said, pointing to the signature lines. "And here, and initial here." Both brothers signed. Tom witnessed the signatures and dated the documents. "The 30-day clock starts now," Tom said. "You have until the end of the month to vacate Ashwood Manor and transfer all relevant files and records to Miss Mitchell." "What will you do with the manor?" Richard asked Elena. "I'm not sure yet," Elena admitted. "Maybe the Foundation headquarters, maybe something else. But whatever I do, it will honor Mom and Dad's memory. It will be something they'd be proud of." "They'd be proud of you," Marcus said quietly. "They always were. We were jealous of that, of how much they loved you." It was the first honest thing Marcus had said to her in years. "They loved you too," Eleanor said. "They just couldn't understand why you couldn't see past money to what really mattered. They talked about it near the end, how much they wished you'd visit just to visit, not just to discuss finances." We should have listened, Richard said. Yes, Elena agreed. You should have, but you can start listening now. After her brothers drove away with the signed settlement, Eleanor and Tom sat in the cabin and shared a simple meal from the preserved supplies, tomato soup from a 1970s can that tasted surprisingly good, and crackers from a 2020 package. You did well, Tom said. Isabella would be incredibly proud. I did what she taught me, Elena said. I chose meaning over revenge. That's harder than most people realize, Tom said. The desire for revenge is powerful, but you resisted it. I've spent 15 years watching people die, Elena said. Mom, Dad, and all the patients I used to care for before I quit nursing. I've learned that life is too short to waste on hate. I'd rather build something beautiful than destroy something ugly. Tom raised his water bottle in a toast. To building something beautiful. Elena clinked her bottle against his. To Grandmother Isabella, who built the foundation for everything. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set through the cabin window, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. What happens now? Eleanor finally asked. Now, Tom said, you decide what kind of life you want to build. You have resources, freedom, and a blank slate. The question is, what do you want to create? Elena thought about the journal, the cabin, the mountain, and the impossible gift her grandmother had left her. I want to help people like me, she said. People who give everything to care for others and end up with nothing. I want them to know they're not forgotten, that their sacrifice matters, that someone sees them. Then that's what we'll build, Tom said. The Isabella Mitchell Foundation for Caregivers. We'll need offices, staff, programs, fundraising. It'll take time. I have time, Eleanor said. For the first time in 15 years, I have nothing but time. And where will you live, my Tom asked. The manor. Here. Eleanor looked around the cabin, her grandmother's refuge, prepared 50 years ago. Small, simple, perfect. I think I'll stay here, she said. At least for now. I'll renovate the manor for the foundation offices and programming space. But this cabin, this is where I found myself again. This is where I learned I was never powerless. I'd like to keep it as it is. A reminder. Isabella would like that, Tom said. She built this as a sanctuary. It seems fitting that it remains one. That night, after Tom left to begin the legal processes that would transfer everything officially, Eleanor sat on the cabin porch under the stars. She'd started the week as a homeless, heartbroken woman with nothing. She was ending it as the owner of an empire, the founder of a foundation, and the inheritor of a grandmother's love that had transcended time itself. She pulled out her phone and opened the photo app. There, in a folder she'd created today, were all the pictures she'd taken of Isabella's journal. She scrolled to the final entry again and read it by the light of her phone screen. I love you forever, Grandma Isabella. I love you too, Eleanor whispered to the mountain night, and I promise I'll make you proud. The wind rustled through the trees, almost like an answer, almost like a benediction. 30 days later, Elena stood in the grand foyer of Ashwood Manor, her manor now, and watched as movers carried out the last of Marcus and Richard's belongings. Her brothers had been not kind exactly, but respectful. They documented everything they removed, had left the house clean, and had even left a note apologizing for the way they'd treated her. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Tom stood beside her, carrying a leather binder full of documents. The transfer is complete. The deed is recorded in your name. Ashwood Manor belongs to you along with everything on the Highlands tract. You are now the official owner of approximately $127 million in assessed property value. Elena shook her head. I still can't process that number. You don't have to, Tom said with a smile. The accountants and financial advisors will process it for you. Your job is to decide how to use it. Over the past month, Elena had made several decisions. First, she'd hired a small but excellent team, Tom's law firm, a reputable accounting firm, and a foundation management consultant. Together, they'd begun the process of establishing the Isabella Mitchell Foundation. Second, she'd commissioned a full survey of the Highlands property. The mineral deposits were even more extensive than the 1973 survey had indicated. Several mining companies had already approached with offers exceeding $100 million for extraction rights. Eleanor had turned them all down. "The mountain stays intact," she'd told Tom. "Grandmother Isabella protected it for 50 years. I'll protect it for 50 more. If that means less money, so be it." Instead, she'd contracted with a sustainable forestry company to manage the timber resources responsibly and had designated 400 of the 500 acres as a permanent conservation easement. The land would remain wild, protected, and beautiful. Third, she'd begun planning the foundation's programs. The Isabella Mitchell Foundation would provide financial grants to caregivers who'd sacrifice careers to care for elderly family members, respite care services to give caregivers breaks, job training and career transition support for caregivers re-entering the workforce. Eventually, affordable housing for elderly people and their caregivers. The foundation would be headquartered here at Ashwood Manor. The grand old house would finally serve a purpose beyond displaying wealth. "Your brothers are settling in," Tom reported. "Marcus is working on the corporate structure and fundraising strategy. Richard is handling legal compliance and non-profit regulations. They're actually good at it." "They were always good at business," Elena said. "They just needed to use their skills for something worthwhile." "Do you think they've actually changed?" Tom asked. Elena considered the question honestly. "I think they've been forced to confront reality. Whether that translates to genuine transformation, I don't know. But they're trying. That's more than I expected." The movers finished and left. The house was finally completely empty, except for the furniture that came with the property. Tom handed Elena a key, a large old-fashioned brass key that opened the manor's front door. "It's yours," he said. "Every room, every memory, every inch. What are you going to do with it?" Eleanor walked through the empty rooms, her footsteps echoing on hardwood floors. This house had held so much: her childhood, her parents' final years, her brother's betrayal, but it also held possibility. She stopped in the room that had been her parents' bedroom. This was where she'd sat with them in their final days, where she'd held their hands and told them stories and promised them they'd be remembered. "I'm going to turn this wing into a hospice care training center," Elena said. "Teach people how to care for dying loved ones with dignity and compassion, so families don't have to figure it out alone the way I did." "That's beautiful," Tom said. They walked through the rest of the house, Eleanor describing her vision for each space. The dining room would become a community meeting area. The library would remain a library, but open to the public. The kitchen would be upgraded to provide meals for foundation programs. The second floor would house offices for staff. The third floor, where Elena's small room had been, would become archives and storage. And the grounds? Elena had plans for those too. Gardens where caregivers could bring their elderly loved ones for peaceful afternoons, walking paths designed for wheelchairs and walkers, a small chapel for quiet reflection. "It'll take years to implement everything," Tom said. "I have years," Eleanor replied, "and for the first time in my life I have the resources to actually make a difference." That evening, after Tom left, Eleanor drove up the mountain road to the cabin. She'd had it updated, running water, better insulation, solar panels for electricity, but she'd kept its essential character. It was still the sanctuary Isabella had built. Elena had decided to live here, at least for now. She'd keep a small apartment at the manor for when she needed to be on site, but the cabin was home. She made tea using the old kettle and sat on the porch as the sun set. The view from here showed the entire valley, the manor, the town beyond it, the mountains rising on all sides. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Foundation received its first donation, $50,000 from an anonymous donor. "We're actually doing this." Eleanor smiled and texted back, "Yes, we are. Good work." 3 months ago, she'd been standing in that manor's foyer being told she was worthless. Now she owned the manor, controlled millions in assets, and was building something that would help thousands of people. But more importantly, she'd reclaimed her sense of self. She wasn't the discarded sister anymore. She wasn't the powerless caregiver. She was Eleanor Mitchell, granddaughter of Isabella, heir to a legacy of strength and compassion. She pulled out her phone and opened the photo of Isabella's final journal entry one more time. She'd read it so many times she had it memorized, but she still loved seeing her grandmother's handwriting. Use what I've given you not just to survive, but to thrive. Build something meaningful. Help others. Show them what strength looks like. I'm doing it, Grandma, Elena whispered. I'm building something meaningful. I'm helping others. And I'm showing them that strength doesn't mean never falling down. It means getting back up, even when they've taken everything from you. A shooting star streaked across the darkening sky. Elena made a wish, not for herself, but for all the caregivers out there who felt invisible, powerless, forgotten. May you find your sanctuary, she wished. May you discover you were never powerless. May you inherit the strength you didn't know you had. The Foundation's first grant would go out next month. The first support group would meet in 6 weeks. The first training program would launch in 3 months. And somewhere, someone like Elena, tired, heartbroken, convinced they'd wasted their life, would receive help, would discover they weren't forgotten, would learn that their sacrifice had meaning. That was Isabella's legacy. That was Elena's mission. That was what $127 million could do when combined with love, compassion, and the determination to help others. Elena finished her tea and went inside. Tomorrow would be another long day of planning, meetings, decisions. But tonight, she would sleep in her grandmother's sanctuary, surrounded by love that had transcended death, in a place that had been waiting 50 years for her to come home. She'd lost everything: home, family, security. But in losing it, she discovered something far more valuable. She discovered who she really was when stripped of everything else. She was strong, she was capable, she was worthy, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. If Elena's story moved you, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We share powerful stories every week about people who turned betrayal into triumph and loss into legacy. Leave a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated or betrayed by family? Have you ever discovered strength you didn't know you had? Share your story. Someone reading might need to hear it today. Elena and Isabella teach us profound truths about love, preparation, and justice. They teach us that true protection plans for the future. Isabella didn't just leave Elena money, she left her a pathway to discovery, a test that only someone worthy could pass, and resources hidden where greed couldn't find them. She loved Elena so completely that she planned her granddaughter's rescue decades before the betrayal occurred. They teach us that kindness isn't weakness. Elena could have destroyed her brothers. Instead, she gave them a chance at redemption, not because they deserved it, but because she refused to become what they were. She chose to build rather than destroy, to help rather than harm, to transform pain into purpose. Most importantly, they teach us that we're never truly powerless. Even when everything is taken from us, even when we're betrayed by those who should protect us, we have choices. We can choose dignity over desperation. We can choose meaning over revenge. We can choose to become the person our challenges require us to be. Elena walked into those mountains with nothing but a backpack and a medallion. She walked out with an empire. But more importantly, she walked out knowing her own worth, something no one could ever take from her again. For anyone facing betrayal, loss, or the feeling that you've wasted your life caring for others, remember, Elena, remember that your compassion is not weakness. Your sacrifice is not meaningless. And somewhere, someone is planning your rescue, even if you can't see it yet. Thank you for joining us for this incredible journey from betrayal to triumph. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that justice may delay, but it never fails those who keep faith. We'll see you in the next story.